Peace Society for our last speaker series event for the year. So thank you for joining. Today we have our amazing presenter, Ashley. She is a first-year PT student at Western. So she's going to be telling us a bit about her experiences within the program and how she got there. So Ashley, go for it. Take over.
Perfect. I'm just going to go ahead and share my slides, and then we'll get started. There we go. Let's see, will it cooperate? Okay. Oh, no, that's not what I wanted. There we go. So, yes, I'm Ashley. I'm a first-year student at Western this year. So I was in your guys' shoes just last year, finishing up my undergrad and doing all my applications. So today we're just going to be going through a little bit more about me, my application process, and some tips that I have for you guys, as well as what Western's like and how my experience has been so far as I'm wrapping up the first term of my undergrad. Not my undergrad, my master's. And then I'll open it up for you guys for questions. So just a little bit more about me. I did not go to Windsor. I did my undergrad at the University of Waterloo in kinesiology with co-op. So I had some co-op experiences throughout that, and it made my undergrad a 5-year program rather than a 4-year program. I also minored in psychology, so I have a pretty strong neuropsychology background. I applied to all 4 Ontario schools for physiotherapy. I also applied for occupational therapy because I didn't really know what I wanted to do yet. So I applied for both, but then kind of right after I applied, I realized no, physio is for sure what I want to do. And I was lucky enough to get into all 4 Ontario physio schools. And I ended up going with Western for reasons that I'll talk about in a little bit. So before we get any further, I'd love if you guys could unmute and just let me know what year you're in, as well as what makes you interested in PT. So if anybody wants to either unmute and do that or put it in the chat, if there is a chat, that'd be fantastic.
I can start. So I'm in 4th year at Windsor, and I'm kind of interested in PT because I've always found like an interest in this field, and I think it's a really cool work environment that kind of requires you to kind of continuously learn and kind of keep up with the research, and I think it's a cool job.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Does anybody else want to just pop in and say anything before I move on?
Yeah, I'll pop in and add, I've been wanting to do PT because there's, again, like Nate said, there's so much to learn and there's so many different areas of PT that it's really what you make of it, and you can really kind of tailor it to your interests. And I find that super awesome, and so many different settings you can work in, like a hospital setting or in a clinic. And I think that's awesome. And having been athlete for so long and been in and out of the PT's office quite often, you get kind of familiar with the field and what they really do. And it's nice to actually be there using evidence-based science to help people and help them regain their mobility. So I think it's an awesome field to be in.
Yeah, that's really similar to my kind of background and journey as well, which we'll talk a little bit more about. But yeah, it's such a diverse field, and it makes it really easy to kind of find your niche and be able to kind of do a 180 in your job 10 years from now and still be in the same field, but doing something completely different without having to go back and do any more education, which is really interesting and unique, I think, to the rehab sciences profession. Yeah, does anybody else want to say anything before I move on? Well, the main reason I wanted you to start kind of thinking about this and figuring out why you're interested in PT is because knowing your why and what makes you interested in physio is a really big part of applications, and figuring out what makes you unique and what unique skills you're going to bring to the field. So for me, I grew up being in athletics and doing a lot of very similar to Simona, being in and out of physio for my own injuries and things like that. And that was kind of my first experience with the profession. So at Waterloo, I was on the varsity track and field team, and I was a co-captain for my final 3 years on the team. And I really, really enjoyed being on that team. It kept me really busy, but that's how I like to be. And then through that, I was also involved in the Inter-University Council, which is a sports like representative for the athletic council within the athletic department. And I was a member of that council for 2 years and then an executive my last year at Waterloo, as well as I was a peer mentor for student athletes coming in their first year of university. It's obviously very overwhelming being a student athlete and doing all the responsibilities of your academic program. So I was the coordinator for that program for my last 2 years. So all of these different opportunities and skills I drew upon when I was applying to physio. Not only that the skills that I've learned are great for myself to be able to like be the best person I can be, but I was able to pull on those while I was writing my personal submissions and things like that. A little bit more about me. Before I did track at university, I was a competitive cheerleader. I competed all over North America at the World Championships. This is me with my team when we won bronze at the World Championships one year. So yeah, that's just another area where I had a lot of injuries, so many sprained ankles, and I fractured a bone in my back and just a lot of different things. So that's where my journey with physio started. I was about 10, I pulled my groin, had to go to physio, and then basically never stopped. Every year I had different injuries going on. So I was really, obviously, like most of us, probably the most aware of MSK and orthopedic physio. But I then started working in a research lab called the Infant and Child Studies Group at the University of Waterloo, where we worked with kids from birth up to about age 7, looking at their overall development, specifically language and cognition. But I was kind of exposed to research methods and how they do a lot of research with children and looking at what those milestones are developmentally. And that's kind of when I started getting more and more interested in just development on the whole. I also in undergrad worked as a nanny / kind of home therapy provider for a 3-year-old with cerebral palsy. So he went mostly to occupational therapy because he was very high functioning. So I went to his occupational therapy appointments every 2 weeks and then worked with him every single day at home for about 2 hours, working on that occupational therapy program, as well as working with his physio, who he saw about once a month, and working on all of the things that he needed to work on. So kind of all of those different experiences allowed me to see physio and rehabilitation and development from lots of different perspectives, and really led me to be super interested in physio. So a little bit more about physio-specific things was I was that home therapy assistant. So we worked on his balance, his gross and fine motor control, his vestibular system, lots of different eye tracking things, some diaphragmatic breathing, all these different areas of physio that I wasn't even really aware was physio when I started in first year of my undergrad. So that kind of introduced me a little bit more to pediatric physio, which is eventually where I want to end up. I'd always known about pediatric occupational therapy, but I didn't really know about pediatric physio. I also, through the physio that I went to after all my own injuries, I ended up volunteering in that clinic and doing a lot of orthopedic private practice stuff, working a little bit with some workplace injuries and concussion, but the majority were sports injuries and just kind of general things that happen as we age and fall, fractures, those types of things. I also volunteered in a group pediatric session. So I just spent a day with a pediatric physio that I met and just kind of watched her classes and kind of saw how a group environment works in physio. So yeah, that's kind of my background with physio and the experiences that I had going into my applications. So just some tips that I have for you guys in terms of your own background and the clinical experience hours that we need to apply. So my biggest thing is get in touch with as many people as you can in various populations and settings. So it's really hard, obviously, with COVID and everything to get a hospital placement, but see if you can work in a more private practice clinic and work in a outpatient rehab clinic and potentially some home care stuff. Just try to see if you can get involved in multiple settings to try to get a better scope of the profession. And along with that, working with different populations as well. As physios, we treat from birth all the way up to geriatrics. So making sure that you understand that there's different age groups that you can work with and different needs within each of those age groups really helps to just solidify your knowledge and your understanding as you apply. So for me personally, I really didn't have a lot of experience in geriatrics or older adult care, with the exception of a few older adults that showed up in the private practice clinic that I was volunteering in. I also had some personal experience with hospital care, as my dad had some pretty severe surgeries on his lower limbs. So he worked with a bit of a physio when he was in hospital, recovering from those. So I had a little bit of experience in that field, but I really don't have that much experience in acute care. But I try to gain that experience through researching and looking on some websites and things, which I'll suggest later in this presentation as well. My next tip in terms of volunteering and things like that is to keep in touch with the people you're volunteering with. Not only is it just great to have them as a network, but for references and things like that, keeping in touch is really important. And I know most of you are in your later years of physio, but not physio, later years of your undergrad, but trying to build as many hours as possible. For me, I had roughly about 200 hours by the time I was applying that I'd kind of accumulated from grade 12 up to my applications. So I really tried to build those over time, just because I've heard the minimum of those 40 hours that you need for some schools is really just going to get you by, but it's not, the more hours, the better, basically, is what I'm trying to say. So moving into specific applications, again, I'd love some participation here. I just want to know what schools you guys are planning to apply to, if you've really thought about that, if it's only going to be Ontario schools or if it's going to be all the schools in Canada or anything like that. For me personally, I did not apply to any physio schools outside of Ontario, but I did look into U of A, UBC, and DAL. I have DAL on there twice, but you know what I mean. So if anybody wants to contribute, that would be great.
I'm kind of planning on doing the same thing, so I'm just going to apply within Ontario, except for Ottawa and I think it's like Laurentian, the French ones. So yeah, I'm going to go McMaster, Queens, U of T, and Western.
Nice. Yeah, that's exactly what I did. I don't speak French, so I wasn't able to apply to either of the French schools. So I really only applied to those main four as well.
Same here. I'll be doing the same as Nate and kind of looking into U of Alberta as well. And yeah.
Yeah, so U of A and UBC have some additional requirements that the Ontario schools don't have. U of A, you just have to complete their Indigenous Studies course, which is free and pretty easy to do. I just didn't know about it early enough, so I didn't have the opportunity to do it. But I've heard U of A is a great school. I have some friends who went to UBC who really enjoy UBC as well. So if you're open to doing that, it's always nice to have more options than less. So yeah, but my biggest advice with applications, which I've heard from many, many physios, is just apply to all four Ontario schools at the minimum, because they are so competitive to get into, as you all are probably well aware. And then the other thing with that is don't get heartbroken if you're waitlisted. The waitlists move a lot, and I'd say almost half my class probably was waitlisted somewhere and ended up getting in to somewhere, but ultimately decided on Western, whether they were waitlisted on Western or not. Yeah, so, oh, my slides are being a little glitchy, but so before you start applying, so over the Christmas break or whatever, I really highly advise you to do some research. So getting to know the profession, you might think you have a pretty good grasp of what a physio is. I definitely thought I did, but as I researched more and more, I learned a lot. So going on to the Ontario Physiotherapy Association and the Canadian Physiotherapy Association's websites, as well as the College of PT website, and basically clicking on all the links, looking at the core competencies, the like the standards, and looking at all the different things and the new research and all the things that are on there really helps you to understand more about what physio is and all the different subfields, because it's more than just sports and pediatrics and geriatrics and acute care. There's, I think, 10, I want to say, different subfields. So learning more and more about those and kind of taking notes really helps to strengthen your applications, as well as knowing the schools. There are actually a few people that I was talking to in my program who didn't know, for example, the catchment area of Windsor, of Western, goes all the way from Windsor, Sarnia to Owen Sound, which is a massive area. And they were kind of thrown back when they were told, oh, you could have a placement in Windsor, you could have a placement in Owen Sound, because they didn't research the schools very well before they applied. So that's important for your own knowledge, but in terms of applications and really making your personal statements and things like that as strong as possible, I really highly suggest going to their websites and basically checking every single link, going through every subpage, look at the courses, look at the program model, the values, the missions statements of those schools, and use those keywords throughout your application. So like evidence-based practice is common, or interprofessional collaboration, and kind of finding ways to incorporate those into your applications. Just like if you're applying to a job, oftentimes people will look at what the key skills are in the job application and put those into their resume. It's basically the exact same idea. You want to make sure that you fit the school, and you try to make sure that you are kind of molding your applications to the school as well. And also understanding the program model is also just very important for your own well-being and thought process. For example, I got into Mac. I chose not to go to Mac because their program model wasn't right for me. They tend to do a very self-taught kind of paced learning, and that wasn't right for me. So I chose not to do that. And then finally, just get to know yourself a little bit more. Really sit back and reflect on the experiences you've had from your young years all the way through to now that can connect back to PT and those core competencies of a physiotherapist. So making lists and physically writing down and connecting all of these things really helps to set a good plan before you even start the application process. Sorry guys, there we go. So a little bit more about personal statements. I'd be more than happy to talk more about my personal statement once we are done this presentation and we go to more of the question section. But the biggest 3 things that I want to talk about is it's more than just about helping people. A lot of people will start their applications about why they want to be a physio. They want to help people, which is great, and we all definitely want to do that. But think about your unique experiences and pull from that more than just you want to help people. So for me, I thought about what brought me to physio and why I specifically want to be a physio. And then secondly, edit, revise, and edit again. Make sure you have others read through it. Use a grammar checking software like Grammarly or something else, because those things make a difference. It shows that you have attention to detail. It shows that you care and that you have good written communication skills. Once you've edited it, revise it again and again and again until it's perfect. Most of the applications have very specific wording counts and character counts. Western had a character count, which was super frustrating, rather than a word count. But what I'm saying is make sure you just be succinct and concise and get your point across, but make sure that it's well written and there's no mistakes and errors in it. And then finally, connect back to what you've learned about the schools, the professions, and make sure you tailor each application to that. Don't just use one application and one personal statement for all the schools you're applying to. Really take the unique things and reword it to fit each school, because each school uses slightly different wording and slightly different things that they value. So yeah, tailor each application. Obviously, you can use chunks in the same points, but reword them so they're unique to each school is my advice for personal statements. Moving on to the Casper, Kira, CAP, they're different things for each school. my biggest advice is spend the $25 on Amazon and buy this book. It was a lifesaver for me. I was super stressed about my Casper, but I ended up doing pretty well, I think, on all three, considering that I got into the three schools that use these examination methods. So this book works really well for all three different tests because more or less they're the same thing. The Casper is typed out. You have short periods of time to do it. The Kira is a little bit longer and it's video recorded, so you're auditorily speaking. And then the CAP is U of T's version, and it is also a written thing where you have like an hour or something to answer all the questions that they have. And this book just gives you a better idea of how to organize your answers, as well as gives you, I think, like 20 or more scenarios for the different types of questions. So it just gave me a lot of ways to start to think about these questions and prep for them. I really only prepped for a few days, just very casually, but having this helped me to think the way that the Casper graders think. So that's my biggest advice when it comes to those tests. And then look on Reddit, YouTube forums, like Pre-Med 101 forum, as those also often have some example questions and some strategies to answer the questions that Casper, Kira, and CAP has. Again, making lists. I'm a big proponent for physically writing things out. Think about experiences that you've had at work. Think about experiences that you've had in your personal life, and jot out points for all the different types of questions that there could be. And just Google like interview questions and things like that, because a lot of these questions are similar in that sense to how you would answer a situational question in an interview. And then finally, just practice. Set a timer, type things out, set a timer and verbally speak how you want to answer these. I remember going to bed like having these questions running through my mind and just kind of practicing them as I was falling asleep. Because for a lot of schools, this is a huge component of what they consider, because they're coming to realize you can be the smartest person and have a 99% average, but if you don't have the people skills, you're not going to make an effective physio. So I would highly suggest getting this book and really practicing and working through it as much as you can. And being honest, don't lie and make up things, but try to find unique ways and what makes you unique, and answer things in an honest way, because again, they're looking for diversity in the profession. They don't want everybody to think the exact same way. Moving on to references. I had two really, really good references. My professional / other reference was a physio that I was shadowing and volunteering for a really long time. And just overall with references, make sure you're asking early. Like, if you know who you want your references to be, ask them now. Be clear with what your expectations are and what you want them to do, and kind of tell them kind of the points you'd love for them to include. And make sure that they do know you well. It's much better to have somebody who knows you well than the perfect reference. So for my academic reference, for example, I've heard of people who just ask their professor who they think is the best like physio type reference, so their rehab class professor, whatever. That's not as good of reference as the person that you've been a research assistant for, who might not even be related to physio, but knows you as a person really, really well. So my academic reference was my co-op supervisor at the Infant and Child Studies group. She had known me for 3 years at the time, and I'd worked for her for those 3 years part-time. So she knew me really, really well and was able to write a really strong reference letter that wasn't generic and really talked about my unique attributes. And same thing with my physio reference. They knew me as a person and was able to speak about me rather than just the generic, this person would be good for physio because they blah, 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 blah. So try to find people who know you well and can write a strong reference letter about you. So then grades and courses. I saw this meme the other day when you see those physio school GPA requirements for the first time, and they are very overwhelming. Physio is getting more and more competitive to get into. The GPA requirements are high, but they are kind of moving away from just grades. Like I said, the Casper and your personal statements matter just as much. So don't stress too much about your grades. I would highly suggest, though, if you don't have those minimum sub GPA cutoffs, take a year, improve your grades, get some good experience, because they will cut below that. I think like 3.3 or whatever it is. When it says like the hard cutoff, they won't look at applications below that. But if you're above that, for sure apply and use your other strengths. For example, for me, I know I was below the cutoff on at least one school, but I still got into that school because of the other aspects that I had going for me. Then my next point here is just interest over information. And what I mean by that is take a course that you're interested in over a course that you think is going to prepare you best for physio school. You're going to get a better grade in a course that you're really interested in rather than a course that you think is going to be the best for information-wise for physio school. Physio school literally will take you back to square one and walk you through everything all together to get everybody on the same page. In our program right now, we have people from all different backgrounds. There's a girl who came from environmental sciences who's in our program this year. So they've really made sure that everyone will get to the same page once you are in the school. So just take a course that you're interested in. You'll get a better mark and it'll increase your chances of getting in. And then finally, for prerequisites, if you have multiple courses that fulfill the criteria, you get to put in the one that you think has the highest mark, or you can really choose whatever one. But I put in for myself the highest mark. So for example, you needed like one psychology credit. I had like 8 or 9. So I chose the course that I had the highest mark in because I thought that would be the most helpful. I don't know for sure that it matters, but that's what I did and it worked well for me. So that's my advice when it comes to courses and grades. Don't stress too much. It's not the be all end all of applications. So moving on to why I specifically chose Western. Here are the main reasons that I thought about when I was prepping this presentation. The first one being a really big catchment area. With all of you guys being at Windsor already, you're already familiar with Windsor. And Western's catchment area goes all the way to Windsor. And like I said, all the way up to Owen Sound, down to like Kitchener-Waterloo area. So for me, I knew, like I have family that lives in Windsor. I have family that lives in Guelph and Kitchener-Waterloo. So for me, I was like, oh, no matter kind of where I am, I'll be within a 45-minute drive approximately of somewhere that I can stay and live. Also, their placements are about 7 to 8 weeks at a time, which is a little different than some other schools that have more frequent but shorter placements. And I thought a longer placement would be better for me to really get comfortable and to get to know and really learn in that time. And they also have a lot of practice settings because they do have that big catchment area. You could be working in a really rural practice. You could be working in a big hospital in downtown London. You kind of have the whole spectrum, whereas some other schools don't necessarily have that rural option or some different settings. And then international opportunities, most of the schools have international opportunities. But when I was looking at Western in particular, I found they had some really, really cool opportunities. For right now, already secured for our next placement. We could go to Ireland, India, Australia, England, Scotland, etc. There's lots and lots of opportunities for that. And at Western, you can do one international placement of year 4. So I thought that was pretty cool. And it's kind of like an exchange, but only 7 to 8 weeks. So I really hope that I am able to do that. And then the other thing more about the curriculum is they do early integration really early on. So basically from day 1, we're in labs, we are learning, we're figuring out the connection between what we're learning in lectures and what we're doing in labs, and classes are taught in a non-linear fashion. Again, some schools that I was researching teach very much in like a 1-month class all about the musculoskeletal system, and then a 1-month class all about neuro, and then a 1-month class all about exercise prescription or whatever. Whereas Western kind of teaches them all jumbled up all at once, which is a little confusing at first. But when I'm looking back on this last term, I realized I was integrating, oh, this neuro condition can connect with this muscular thing, and these all kind of connect, and was able to really integrate my knowledge right away. So I thought that that was really helpful, and it gets you thinking in a clinical sense right away. For me, it was really convenient. I'm originally from Guelph, so it's only about an hour and a half from my home, and it also conveniently is the cheapest living accommodations on average of the 4 Ontario English physio schools. So for me, it was nice that my rent would be a little cheaper. Also, Western is known for a strong focus on manual therapy. They have strong foundations with really, really good physical therapists who are well known in the field for manual therapy. And manual therapy and the more MSK stuff is about 50% of the OSCE exams and the competency exams to write at the end of physio school. So I thought that that would be really helpful. All the schools, though, do cover everything, and you're going to get a great education no matter where you go. I just thought that that was interesting about Western. And then finally, the social scene. Western is known for more of a party school, which is fine, but I really like the physio aspect of that. Our physio family is super tight knit. We know the upper years, we all have an upper year buddy that we're paired with. And like our physio class is always helping each other. For example, we had a test, we'll all share our notes in our group chat. We all help each other out, as well as like we're all on a bunch of intramural teams together. We had ultimate frisbee team called the intervertebral discs, fun physio pun. But there was like 15 people on that team that were all physios, and then every game we'd have other physio students come out and cheer us on. So it's a really, really fun family, and we all really support each other, unlike in undergrad where it's a little bit more competitive. In physio, everyone really wants to help each other, and we all want to succeed. Yeah. Then in terms of the specific courses at Western, term 1 is basically the same as undergrad. It starts in September, ends in December, and we take anatomy, which we all need anatomy as a prerequisite to get in. But once you're in, this anatomy course focuses a lot more on functional implications than what I had in my undergrad. So we're talking about like, if this nerve is severed, what are the functional implications? What's weak? What's paralyzed? What sensory deficits are you going to have? And then we also have 2 interprofessional courses where we're working with other professions. So the OTs, the speech language pathologists, the audiologists, where we all come together and kind of discuss different things. So the one is professionalism, and we're talking about communication and ethics and diversity and a lot of different topics there. And then critical appraisal is more about how do we critique the literature and how do we do make sure that we're really using evidence-based practice. And then the physio-specific courses, we have our theory course. Like I said, it's kind of all jumbled together where we're learning about musculoskeletal things, neuro, pain, modalities, exercise prescription, all the kind of basic theory that we need to learn. And then also we have a clinical skills lab that kind of mirrors what we're learning in our theory course. We're learning range of motion tests, strength tests, how to size gait aids, how to do like hospital bed transfers, and neurological testing and lots of different things like that. So it's a pretty good balance. The theory course is very heavy, but it balances out because you're really learning the clinical skills as well. And these IPE courses are much, much lighter. So it really balances out to a pretty manageable workload. And then next term, we get started on a lot more clinical things where we're doing acute care and lower limb MSK physio, and then we switch to upper limb in after reading week in February. So we learn a lot of clinical things right away, and you kind of have to as the program's only 2 years. So kind of a day in my life. Basically, every single morning we have a clinical lab for 2 hours with my learning team. So what Western does is you are put into a team of 5 people. That's your group for the term. You practice on them. You go out for lunch with them. You just build a really good friendship with those 5 people in your group. So that's basically how my morning is spent. And then in the afternoon, I might watch a lecture. Right now, our lectures are online. Next term, they're going back to in-person. But watch some lectures. We might have an in-person class. Some of our classes are in person. They're usually in the afternoons. And then in the evenings, the labs are open for just whatever practice you want to do. So you can go in and practice on your classmates. I also have a part-time job, even though a lot of schools say you can't maintain a part-time job. If you have good time management skills, you can maintain a few hours a week working. I work about 8 hours a week. I find it manageable. I'm also studying in the evenings. I might have my intramurals or another fun thing with some classmates, or just chill out, watch a movie, whatever. Basically, what I'm saying is you do still have some free time in physio school if you manage your time efficiently. And just some final words. These are some things that are said over and over and over in physio school. 7.0, good to go. Basically, grades don't matter once you get into physio school. We just need a 70% overall average to move on. And so we say 7.0, good to go a lot, because you really have to switch your mindset to, oh, I need to get the best grade possible, to, no, I really need to understand this content and thoroughly comprehend what I'm doing, even if that means that on my exam I'm only going to get a 70, and that's totally okay. And then secondly, get comfortable with the uncomfortable. Western in particular is a little disorganized at times, so just getting comfortable with things kind of being up in the air, and that's how it is in practice. Things are never going to be black and white. It's going to be kind of up in the air and switching and doing things and thinking on your feet a lot. And that brings us to it depends. There's a lot of gray area in physio, and being okay with that and being okay with kind of learning as you go is really important. So that kind of wraps up my presentation. I'm going to open it up for questions. If anybody has any specific questions, feel free to unmute yourselves and ask away.
So I just wanted to add, thank you. Oh, can we see me? I'm here. Okay. Thanks again for presenting. That was a lot of useful information. I love the way how you laid out the presentation, so we could really get a good feel for the application process and everything. So I guess my first question would be, how did you find being in your first year and having all those online classes? And did you think it was difficult, or were you kind of used to it since you already experienced that in undergrad?
So it's a little bit of both. I did already have it in undergrad, so it wasn't a super big adjustment for me. There are people, though, who are applying to physio 5, 6, 7 years out of undergrad who haven't been in school in a while. So for them, it was definitely a lot harder. However, there are still some glitches with it. They've kind of rejigged so basically our one course is online, our theories course, and then everything else is in person. So our theories course, they rejigged the order of how they are presenting things. But they're still using last year's video recording. So sometimes they're like, refer to lecture 15, when lecture 15 is something different than what they mean. So that's been a little frustrating, but they've really listened to our feedback. And for the incoming class next year, it will be different. They will have re-recorded things, or so they are saying. So I think it'll be much better for the future years. But overall, I like it. I like that you can rewind if you miss something or listen to it. A lot of our lecturers talk really slow, so I'm listening to them on like 1.25 speed, which is nice. However, you do kind of lose the ability to ask questions in real time. So you still get that through labs and things like that, but it will be really nice next term to have everything in person. So yeah, I think it's nice to have a little bit of a hybrid model and still have the opportunity. What we keep saying is in the ideal world, it would be like a live video call where they're presenting and you can ask things, but it be recorded so you can go back and rewatch later if you need to. But yeah, overall, it hasn't been too bad.
So another question I have is, because due to COVID, it has been difficult to get those diverse experiences, and a lot of things that used to happen, a lot of volunteering experiences that were available are now not running and not available. Do you think admissions took that into account when looking at applications?
I think they will more so this year than they did last year, because last year, really, COVID had been around for like 9 months. Really, you should have had at least a little bit of experience before then. Obviously, I think they cared less about it than they had in previous years. What I would suggest for you guys is email some physios, set up a Zoom call, even if you can just chat with them and pick their brain. Um, that's better than nothing. Even if you can't physically be there and observe sessions, try to just build that network and try to talk with them, try to figure out what they like, what they would wish could be different, and whatever, and just try to figure out what they're doing in their practice, and then maybe talk to a different physio who does a completely different type of practice. But yeah, I do think that as long as you have that minimum, and they might have, honestly, I haven't looked, but they might have changed the minimum for this new year. I know they have for audiology, because audiologists needed to be in very specific practices. And they said, like, no, you don't need to do that for the next 2 years or whatever. So yeah, I think that it matters less so. I would just really focus on learning as much as you can through research, because that's really what I got out of my clinical experiences and my volunteer experiences, is to really understand the profession a lot better, which is something I think you can do through researching. So yeah, that's what I would suggest. I do think that they'll take it into consideration for sure.
Thank you for that. Anyone else have any questions? Okay, Nate.
I honestly don't have any questions. I usually have a few, but you covered so much that like I can't really think of anything. But I think your presentation was like very, very well spoken and covered kind of all the bases for everything. Yeah, I don't know. I think kind of the only thing is like, is that book only available online for the Casper? So I'm writing it, me and Simone are writing it on the 9th, and I wasn't aware of that book. So I took a look on Amazon. It says it wouldn't come in until after I write.
You
Did you buy it
might,
online or?
yeah, I bought mine on Amazon. You might be able to find it on like Facebook Marketplace. Sometimes they're for sale. And even if you can't, if you go to their website, like the BMO website, they have at least a good amount of questions on there. Yeah, so that book has basically a good chunk of questions from their book is on their website. They also have a YouTube channel that kind of walks you through a lot of what's in the book as well. So even if you can't get the book, go to their YouTube channel, watch their videos about Casper. Yeah, I can maybe also, do I have it? I'm not at my apartment right now. I'm gonna be back there later this evening. If I have it, I'll take some pictures of the questions and I can send it to the Facebook or the Instagram page for you guys, so you can share that around if I do have it still. So yeah.
Okay,
You can do
that'd be
well.
super helpful. But
Yeah.
yeah, thanks.
Yeah, if you can't get it, at least go on their website, and just
Yeah,
look on their YouTube and things like that.
there's
But
a ton of resources out there for
yeah,
that. So yeah.
honestly, like, it seems stressful before you do it, but once you're done it, it's gonna be okay. Yeah, Casper is much more stressful than it needs to be, and
Yeah, okay.
often the like all the examples and things have like a paragraph that's like this long, and you're like, I really have like 30 seconds to write something. So it's fine if, like, I think on mine there was like 2 questions I didn't get to fully answer. Just move on and know that they balance out your scores as like more of an average. So yeah.
Okay. All right, that's good to know.
Yeah. Cool. Does anybody else have any other questions, comments, anything like that?
So you chose Western. You said all your points for it. What were your other schools that were kind of in your top considerations,
So
or something you had maybe similar to Western that you kind of had a hard time
yeah,
deciding over,
I
and
can
why
kind
you
of,
ultimately did
yeah, I'll
Western?
go through like my process. So like I said, I did get into all 4 schools. I basically immediately cut out U of T for a multitude of reasons. They have a really big class size. That's something I really like about all 3 other schools, is it's around 70 people. So you get to know your classmates a lot more than at U of T where it's 120. It's not a huge difference, but for me, I was like, okay. Plus, I'm not from Toronto. I don't like Toronto. I don't like being in the city. It's a lot more expensive to live there. And I'd also heard that almost all of their placements are in hospital settings, which I don't want to work in a hospital. So for me, it wasn't a good fit. But some of my classmates, U of T was their first choice because they really want to work in acute care in hospital settings. So they would have chosen U of T had they gotten into U of T. So that's why I didn't choose U of T. I didn't choose Mac because I really not a big fan of this independent learning. Personally, I don't learn very well that way. I learn really well from watching and from people teaching me and me going home thinking about it and then figuring it out. But they do a lot of independent learning, which again, for some people is great. You just need to know yourself and kind of figure out if that is what works for you. And then Queens and Western are very similar in their program model and then like what kind of they're known for. I just didn't want to be that far. It was basically like a 5-6 hour drive or an hour and a half drive from home. And I wouldn't have known anybody in the catchment area for Queens, so therefore I would have been paying more for accommodation during those placements and things like that. So that's how I ultimately decided on Western. Yeah, like I do want to do pediatrics, and what I'd been told was like none of the schools in Ontario are particularly like focused on pediatrics. All of the schools train you to be a generalist. So I was like, really doesn't matter at the end of the day. So, but yeah, Western was my choice for those reasons. But yeah, it really just depends on what you want to do and what setting you think you might want to go into and where you're from and other personal factors. So you can't really go wrong with any of the schools. They all provide a top-notch education. So yeah.
Thank you for that. And so you went right into physio school after undergrad, right?
Yeah. So I graduated in April and then started in September.
Right. And what we've been hearing a lot is that that doesn't happen often. So do you believe your specific experiences and your GPA really allowed that to happen?
Yeah, I honestly was very surprised I got into all of the schools. My GPA, so I think I had an 3.86 on the Casper scale. So yes, high, but not super high. Like a lot of people who get into physio schools have like 4.9 or 3.95 or like very high 3.9s. So I was like right above that cutoff for a lot of the schools, like right around it. So yeah, I think for me personally, I had really strong letters of recommendation. I had good clinical experiences. And I tried to write my personal statements in a way that really showed that I understood like acute care. I understood like pediatrics. I understood MSK. Like I tried to show that I understood that physio is not just treating sports injuries and workplace falls. Like it's a lot more than that, and it works in a bunch of different settings. So I really tried to highlight that. And like I mentioned in the presentation, I really focused on like using the keywords that they use, but like synonyms of them, because I didn't want to like be like, they say this, I say the exact same thing, but kind of using their terminology to try to kind of guide that I have the same values as this school and that kind of thing. So yeah, I think that it was more so the other elements and having like a strong Casper and all of that. You don't know what you scored on Casper, but based off of my results, I would assume that I think I did pretty well, but I don't know. So yeah, I think grades are not the be all end all, but like I said, like they do not look at you if you are below that like bottom cutoff. So if you are, just take a year, take some upgraded classes, and don't stress about applying right away if you're worried. But at the same time, like if you are in that range where you like are near the like average for the last couple of years or whatever, apply, try your best, and if you don't get in, you don't get in. And like I said, wait lists move quite a lot. I know people who were on wait lists who didn't hear anything till August, but they still got in and they are now at school and enjoying the program. So, and at the end of the day, we all graduate the exact same. So it doesn't really matter if you get in right away, you're waitlisted, you take a few years and come back. Yeah, it's quite a wide variety of people, and like there's a good amount of people who do get in their first try. Like I know at least probably 10 to, yeah, at least 10, but probably more than that. It's probably more than that. It's probably closer to like 20 or 30 actually at Western who got in their first year. Like I did 5 years of high school and then 5 years of undergrad. So I was born in 97, but a lot of the people are born in 99. So that would mean like they were first year application right away got in. So yeah, it's not impossible to do. A lot of people can do it, but it does definitely take some work on your end. But don't get stressed if it doesn't happen. And yeah.
Thank you for that. That's good to hear and good to kind of have that reassurance and know that it is possible and it can happen.
Yeah.
Right.
And like I said, like the wait lists move a lot because, for example, like for me, by me accepting at Western, I'm then letting one spot at each of the other schools, somebody move into that wait list. And a lot of people who do get into one school will get into at least 2, 3, 4. So those wait lists move a ton. So yeah, like just try your best, apply to all 4, and that's the best that you can do, right? So yeah, it is possible. A lot of people can do it, especially if you have good grades and good supplementary materials. So
for sure. Another question is, I guess I kind of haven't been having this issue figuring out being a part of this society and starting this society, where this would count toward my my volunteer experience. Would that be physio related? Would it not be physio related?
That's a good question. I would say I would put it in your personal statements and just talk about like, look, I started this society because I was really passionate about physio and wanted to kind of do this. And you can talk about the skills that overlap. Like that's what I did a lot, like with my like being on IU council and like being a peer mentor and things like that. Like I talked about like I was able to work on diversity and like reducing oppression and things like that. And then I also talked about like, I don't know, like building my knowledge and communication with a bunch of different people and organization and all of that. So like every time you think of an experience that you have, like try to list out those skills that you've gained from it and then try to fit that in. So yeah, I would say it would go on personal statements and try to like weave it in there with your other experiences. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. That's
But
helpful.
yeah, definitely something to put down. Like honestly, put down anything and everything you can think of to start. And then like I think that my first version of my personal statement was like way over the limit. And then I just slowly like parsed it down and tried to figure out like what could I link together to make it like one sentence instead of 3 and things like that. But it's way better to start with way too much and have to pare down than to forget things that very much could help you. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. That was very helpful as well.
You're welcome.
Anyone else have any more questions before we wrap it up? We're over the time here with our delay. So last questions at all? If you're still okay to stay, Ashley, I don't know if you...
to answer a few more questions. That's not a problem.
Okay, awesome.
If anybody has any. And I think I now follow you guys on Instagram. My Instagram's BH_Ash. So if anybody has questions that they think of later or anything, feel free to DM me. I'm more than happy to get back to you and answer your questions there as well. So, because I know sometimes I think of questions like days later and I'm like, oh, I should ask that. So if you do, feel free to reach out.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, no more questions. I think that's it. I think you did such a good job getting everything in the presentation that everything was really covered. So yeah, I think we're going to end it there. So thank you again for joining us and for taking the time today to present. Very informative, very helpful. And we wish you good luck with your studies and hope to see you maybe.
Yeah, yes. Good luck with all your applications and with exam season coming up and everything. I'm sure you guys will do great. And yeah, hopefully see some of you at Western next year or wherever else. But hopefully you guys will be successful. So awesome. Well, thank you for having me. It was nice to present, and I will hopefully hear from some of you guys later. Bye.
All right. Thank you. Bye now.